What is up, friends, and shalom, and welcome to this episode of the Watchdog. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are living in biblical times. Want to say, first off, welcomes to everybody who are here. I are grammar correctly. To everybody who is here, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you guys. If you are here, please remember to like and share this video and consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time that we go live. And please do remember that you can follow us on Rumble as well. That is our backup account. If you like the content that we're providing here, you and I both know that YouTube is not really a big fan of conservative political content. So do consider following our backup account on Rumble. It is at the tag the Synagogue, not the Synagogue News. Long story. Basically, Rumble won't let me change it. But anyways, at the tag the Synagogue on Rumble, you can follow this program there. Everything is posted there after the fact, but nevertheless, it is still posted there. So if this ever goes down, or if, heaven forbid, we have an episode that is pulled, which has happened before, YouTube has pulled at least 2 of my episodes that I can remember. You can find those or just find us, depending on what exactly happens, on that Rumble account. So definitely do consider getting a Rumble account and following us there. If you want to follow us on various social media platforms, you can do so. I'm on Gab, Parler, Facebook, Minds, Twitter, and Truth Social. Gab, yeah, that was all of them. Okay. All at the tag of the Synagogue. Going to have different display names on each of them, but nevertheless, the tag will be the same on each of them. So please do consider following us there. And if you are following on any of those particular websites, definitely consider sharing this video to those websites. Want to give a particular shout out to those which are alternative social media websites. If you're on Twitter, there is no reason not to be getting a Gab account, a Minds account, or a Truth Social account. These are companies which will respect your internet free speech, which is not something that can be said of the majority of social media and even video sharing platforms out there. So definitely do be considering a Gab account, actually Parler's still down, a Minds account, or a Truth Social account if you're a Twitter user, because they're basically Twitter clones. I know people are saying, well, Elon Musk now, but it's better with Musk. It's not fixed with Musk. As a Twitter user, I can say that quite definitively, to be honest. But it is better. I will admit, it is better. Let's see, what else do we have here? Remember that you can give to the Patreon, and in so doing, get access to our bi-weekly political column, Blogladite. Link will be floating here in the live chat in just a moment, but every other Friday, this Friday being that Friday, we do post a blog entry on this blog, which Patreon hosts. It's $10 monthly in order to access it. The subject this week is how NFL quarterbacks are a microcosm of American racism. Rather boring title, but nevertheless, it's just something I noticed being a football fan, how the way that the media treats the black quarterback question says an awful lot about the way race is treated in this country. And that is not a woke thing, by the way. It's actually the exact opposite. The fact that there are, I believe there's 8 starting quarterbacks right now who are black. I'll have to go check my notes. Excuse me. My bad. But about 8. And people say that that's not enough. Oh, well, that's only 8. Can you believe there's only 8? Even though the black population is only 13% of the population. And if you look at various other racial demographics in the same sport, like the amount of, Chinese people who play the sport regardless, or the amount of white people who play running back, or the amount of, and none of which is racist, by the way. It's just the way it is. It's just normal, right? Certain ethnic demographics, certain racial demographics have certain interests because of cultural things, have different athletic talents because of genetics. Nothing racist about it, but the media treats it as if it's racist. And I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that in discussing racism in America. Not that the liberals would like that. But anyways, if you want access to that, if you want to read that article or any other article that we write, please do consider contributing to the Patreon. Also, if you'd like to support us in any other way, you can contribute to the PayPal as well. Don't really have a whole lot of announcements, questions, comments, critiques, anything of that nature in the live chat or in the comment section down below. I think that's pretty much it as far as the announcement. Sorry, I just read a comment here. Are you going into Elon and his WEF hire later or at a later date? Also, Tucker and Matt Walsh is supposed to go to Twitter. I am going to talk about Tucker and Matt Walsh. To be honest, the WEF hire is not something that I'm super familiar with. You would think, considering I've been researching a lot about the WEF, that would not be the case. But now I've been made aware. Richard, next Tuesday, Lord willing, if we have this up, I will be discussing that. And thank you for bringing that to my attention. I was not actually aware of that. But that is quite the interesting development, to be honest with you. At any rate, I want to go ahead and get right into the articles here today. But of course, before we do, I'd like to share with you guys a This Day in History fact. And this is not so much a This Day in History fact, as much as it is just a very interesting fun fact about this day that I recently discovered. Today is May 18th, 2023. Apparently, I did not know this until about 2 days ago, but apparently today is considered International Museum Day. That's a thing. Had no idea that was a thing until basically this last Tuesday, but nevertheless, apparently that is a thing. It is International Museum Day. International Museum Day is something coordinated by the International Council of Museums. It has been an annual celebration since 1977. And it has been adapted not just by the United States, but by 28 different countries with roughly 20,000 museums participating in this little quasi-holiday. So I guess the main thing to take away from this is if you've ever been interested in seeing a museum, see if there's any sort of special, deals or anything like that going on at the museum that you want to attend locally. Completely possible that today could be a good day to do that. But anyways, I don't know. I thought that was super peculiar that today was, I didn't know there was a museum day. You know what I mean? And it just seems like such a odd thing to organize. Of course, I guess they have, a whole bunch of, so much of a, random holidays. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, yeah. So that's kind of our little fun history fact today, if that counts as a history fact. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. The other thing, though, I want to quickly say is today is Ascension Day. So for those of you who celebrate, happy Ascension Day. Brief note, because some of you may be wondering, what the heck is Ascension Day? Ascension Day is the Christian holiday that celebrates the ascension of Jesus Christ to the right hand of the Father. 40 days after Easter is when it takes place, because if you look at the scriptures, particularly Acts chapter 1, 40 days after the resurrection is when Jesus ascends to heaven. So we have Ascension Day. So happy Ascension Day for all of you who celebrate. I will be celebrating myself, though I'll be working most of the day. And just wanted to go ahead and give a brief shout out to the holiday. So we got some interesting things to talk about. I want to talk about some stuff going on with the Pope. I want to talk about the World Council of Churches. I want to talk about Central Asia. But before we get into any of that, I want to talk about the headliner today, which is this Durham report. I don't know if you guys are aware of what this Durham report is or what's been happening with it or just what's the whole deal with the Durham report. But I want to ask the question and communicate to you, what is the Durham report? Now, for some context here, many of you may recall that there has been an awful lot of investigation of former President Donald Trump for so-called Russian collusion. Now, there's been an investigation with Donald Trump for virtually everything at this point. The media is constantly investigating him for something. And I won't pretend that all of it is completely illegitimate, because certainly there are some things to be said about, is the Trump Foundation perhaps a little bit corrupt? Was the Stormy Daniels thing perhaps a little bit corrupt? It's possible, but of course this happens to virtually every politician, or at least these kinds of situations. Virtually every politician gets themselves involved in, right? And yet somehow Trump is the only one who actually manages to be investigated for it, which is, of course, entirely political in nature. I don't think anybody would necessarily deny that, at least outside of the left. We all recognize that, like, oh, hey, we know that there's this laptop thing going on with Joe Biden, and we know that Barack Obama's daughter went to go work with Harvey Weinstein, and we know that Eric Swalwell was romantically involved with a Chinese spy, and yet somehow, some way, only Donald Trump is consistently and constantly being investigated by the federal government. Is that a coincidence? I don't think there's any way to say that it is. And I'm not even really a big Donald Trump fan, but I still know what a duck looks like. You know what I mean? And if it quacks and if it looks and yada, yada, the saying. What we have here, friends, is a duck. He is consistently and constantly being essentially persecuted by the federal government, not because he's actually a super bad guy, he may or may not be, but because they don't like his politics and they want to keep their little clique in power. I think there's no better example of this than the January 6th investigations. And without condoning or condemning or anything like that, what happened with January 6th, let's be perfectly clear here. We had an entire summer's worth of riots that made January 6th look like absolute child's play, right? And how many people were arrested for that? How many people were charged for that? How many people were investigated for supporting that? 0, 0, and 0, right? And yet with the January 6th thing, we had people going out and raiding people's homes so that they could arrest them. Oh, hey, you were actually found here. We need to investigate you and ask you questions and make sure that you're not some kind of terrorist or something like that, right? Donald Trump gets banned from Facebook and from Twitter and from YouTube and all these other kinds of things, right? They want to end up having an investigation around him for that. Yet another investigation, right? And it's just clear political posturing. That's all it is, right? Well, with that background, the Durham report is essentially some vindication, actually, for President Donald Trump. Surprisingly enough, I guess if you can't find anything, it's possible that you could just make stuff up. But apparently, we're not quite at that point yet in this nation's history. Thank the Lord. But at any rate, this is from Politico, takeaways from the Durham report on the Trump-Russia probe. Let me go ahead and get some coffee here. Why Durham played defense, who gave him the cold shoulder, and what the report means for a key surveillance authority. Now, we're also going to be reading an article from Fox News here in a moment. Do bear in mind that there is a liberal bias in the majority of media. So the article we're about to read from Politico is going to have a little bit of a political bias towards the left, but I digress. Let's jump right into the article. The original writers here are Josh Gerstein and Betsy Woodruff Swan, and this was published on the 15th of May. For 4 years, Special Counsel John Durham examined the origins of the FBI's investigation of links between Russian officials and Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. His final report, which clocks in at more than 300 pages, was released Monday. Here are some takeaways. First, they say, Durham on defense. In the report's introduction, Durham seems to respond to some Republicans' disappointment that he failed to secure significant criminal convictions related to alleged FBI misconduct in the Russia-Trump probe, or Trump-Russia probe, sorry. Quote, not every injustice or transgression amounts to a criminal offense, end quote, he wrote. And that, for the record, is true. I think, just to give a clear and quick example, if I were to cheat on my wife, that would be an injustice. That would be a transgression. That would be evil. But it's not a crime, at least not in most states. I think in some states it might be. In Idaho, it actually might be. I'll have to check on that. There are some states that still have adultery laws on the books, but in California, for example, it's not going to be a crime. To give an even stronger example, and because I hate California, I like to crap all over them whenever I can. I, as a 24-year-old man, although I'm only 24 for the next 2 days, could legally sleep with a 14-year-old in the state of California right now. Would that be evil? Yes. Would that be a transgression? Yes. Would that be an injustice? Yes. But is it a crime? Not if I'm in California, it isn't. You can sleep with somebody who is 14 years or older if you have a 10-year or less difference. That's a fact. Look it up. And if you think that that's a disgusting fact, then thank the Lord your mental faculties are still working. The California is literally an absolute cesspool. It's disgusting. But anyways, digression aside, it is true that not every injustice or transgression amounts to a criminal offense. So Durham is correct in saying that. Back to the article. Durham brought criminal charges against just 3 people. He lost both cases that went to trial, and in a third case, an ex-FBI lawyer named Kevin Kleinsmith pleaded guilty to altering an email that was used to support a surveillance application. Kleinsmith was not sentenced to any prison time. The law, quote, does not always make a person's bad judgment, even horribly bad judgment, standing alone, a crime, end quote, Durham wrote. And again, see the aforementioned examples. He added that the law doesn't prohibit, quote, all unseemly or unethical conduct that political campaigns might undertake for tactical advantage, end quote. And ain't that the truth? That's just the absolute truth. I mean, to be honest with you, if the law made all, quote, unseemly and unethical conduct illegal, we probably wouldn't have political campaigns anymore, right? Let's be perfectly honest about that. Now, not every politician is involved in nothing but smear campaigning. Excuse me. For example, I can think of the Ammon Bundy 2022 campaign for governor here in Idaho. But most of them certainly are, right? So we wouldn't even have elections for the most part if that was something that we made illegal, which perhaps we should. But anyways, he says that all unseemly or unethical conduct is not prohibited and that prosecutors must prove criminal intent to secure convictions. That's not necessarily true. At least it's not always true. It depends on the crime. Manslaughter is a thing, right? Even though obviously manslaughter, the very definition of manslaughter is accidental or negligent homicide. So that's not entirely true. And obviously that's just the one example with murder. But if I were to, for example, throw something in my house and it broke and hurt my wife, I could be charged with a minor, a misdemeanor domestic violence charge, right? Even though it was not my intention to strike her, because of the fact that I was doing something negligent and that led to her being injured. And I'm actually there, if you guys are wondering why I'm using this specific example, it's because I actually know an individual who's been through this, precisely this. He threw a coffee mug at a refrigerator, excuse me. The coffee mug broke and his now ex-girlfriend ended up going to the courts about it, and he was charged with misdemeanor in domestic violence, right? So point there being, it's not entirely true that you have to actually prove intent in order to get a conviction. Maybe for this particular crime it is. I guess I'd have to know a little bit more about the law in order to judge that properly. But nevertheless, you can absolutely be charged in many situations without criminal intent. Another common example that I think we all know of is drug trafficking and distributing drugs, right? Or they literally have a crime for it. It's called frequenting, right? Which is if you frequent an area that is known to have drugs being used, trafficked, or otherwise possessed. That is a crime. I was charged with that crime as a 14-year-old kid. So yeah, that's just... It is not true to say that you need to prove criminal intent, at least not in all situations. Maybe in this particular situation it is, but nevertheless, I digress there. Hang on real quick. There we go. That last line appears to reference the scores of allegations Republicans have levied at Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign and its outside allies, most of which have been proven to be correct, I might add. Durham also seemed to dismiss the idea that the quick acquittals by juries of 2 of the 3 defendants his office prosecuted suggested his team's efforts were misguided. It's particularly hard to secure convictions in politically sensitive cases, the veteran federal prosecutor wrote. That is absolutely the case. Perfect example of that. We have 4 impeachments of the president, 2 to Donald Trump, 1 to Bill Clinton, 1 to Andrew Johnson. 0 have actually ended in an impeachment. 0 have actually ended in an impeachment. So, and that's not even the only examples we can give. We can talk about Hillary Clinton with the emails. We can talk about the Anthony Weiner case. So many different examples that we could talk about. The point just being that it is incredibly difficult to prosecute these things, mainly because it shakes the boat and shakes up the status quo. And a lot of people don't want that to be turned around on them if and when it comes to fruition that they have actually done some level of criminal activity or otherwise unethical activity, right? Or comes to national knowledge, I guess I should say, not come to fruition. So this is a big reason why many people may recall Gerald Ford controversially pardoned U.S. President Richard Nixon. Gerald Ford was the vice president at the time. Richard Nixon resigned, which made Gerald Ford the president, and then Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon in what may be, in what may be the most popular pardon in the history of the United States of America. Why did he do that? Well, a big part of the reason why people think, at least, is to maintain the status quo and to make sure that we didn't make it a habit, or we didn't make a habit out of, prosecuting former presidents. He didn't want that, right? Because then that eventually can be turned into, first off, it can be turned into a political game where you're just prosecuting a president because you didn't like him. But secondly, it can also be turned into something where, everybody's got skeletons in their closet. Majority of politicians have done something that is prosecutable, and they don't want it to be turned into something where that gun is turned back around on them. Is that corrupt? Well, yeah, definitely. But that's not the question, is it? Anyways, Durham gone wild. This is where Politico is going to get a little bit, biased. But hey, I'm biased, so whatever. Durham's report concludes with something unusual for a criminal probe conducted under the Justice Department's special counsel regulations. A variety of recommendations about how DOJ and the FBI should change the way they do business. Early on, Durham said he was not proposing any wholesale changes in the FBI or DOJ policies. Quote, "The answer is not the creation of new rules, but a renewed fidelity to the old," Durham writes. End quote, Durham writes. Yet the report concludes with a 17-page discussion of how politically sensitive investigations should or could be handled differently in the future, including by assigning a career official to challenge FBI surveillance applications in such cases and not leaving important information in footnotes. The report often sounds more like an inspector general inquiry in search of waste, fraud, and abuse that may not rise to the level of criminality. However, it lacks some of the checks often employed in that process, such as the opportunity for individuals and agencies mentioned to offer factual corrections and rebuttals. Durham's report also shows that his prosecutors ranged far afield of the core question of whether people involved in initiating or investigating the FBI Trump-Russia probe should be prosecuted. In addition to exploring the intelligence community's handling of the Trump-Russia allegations, he probed the decision-making about largely unrelated allegations of foreign influence efforts aimed at Clinton. Durham said he wanted to assess whether Clinton-related and Trump-related allegations were being handled with equal rigor and aggressiveness. Quote, "Comparing the respective investigative activity was significant to the investigation since it could support or undercut allegations of institutional bias against either candidate," end quote, the special prosecutor wrote. However, he acknowledged that because the facts involved in the various allegations differ, comparing them is, quote, "undoubtedly an imperfect method," end quote, to assess whether such bias existed. The wide ambit of Durham's final report may stem from how his inquiry began in 2019. as a broad review of the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation. At the outset, Attorney General Bill Barr seemed to have tapped Durham for a review of the DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz's decision not to declare that political bias infected early judgments and errors in what would eventually become the Robert Mueller probe. But within months, Durham's work morphed into a criminal inquiry. Its hybrid status as both a criminal investigation and a kind of after-action report continued to the end. And it makes perfect sense why it turned into a criminal investigation, right? Because what are the allegations being made against those involved in the Mueller probe? It's that this was a, first off, illegal, and second off, politically biased. Politically biased investigation meant to tarnish the name of a big name political opponent of the current establishment, right? So it makes perfect sense that this would turn eventually into a criminal investigation, because that is a crime. And I don't know why that's so hard for some people to understand. They seem to think, oh, well, this probe is overstepping its bounds. This report is overstepping its bounds. Durham is overstepping his bounds, right? But that's entirely not the case. If it is true that the investigation into the Trump-Russia court, what would you say? Ugh, I'm losing words right now. The investigation into whether or not Trump and Russia colluded with each other. There you go, Jay. If it is true that that was done under illegal or suspicious circumstances, then it is also true that those people need to be charged with a crime, right? So really, Politico and CNN and MSNBC and all these other websites that are trying to say Durham is somehow doing something wrong are full of it. And what that they are full of is not only political bias, but, of course, fecal matter. Fallout for a key surveillance authority. Lurking in the report and the FBI's response to it is a key fear for law enforcement and the intelligence community that Durham's withering conclusions about the Bureau's handling of the Trump-Russia probe will prompt Congress to kill off a key surveillance authority when it expires in December. Durham does not mention the so-called Section 702 authority explicitly, but he does say he is not recommending anything, quote, that would curtail the scope of reach of FISA and the FBI's investigative activities in a time of aggressive and hostile terrorist groups and foreign powers, end quote. As if any other time exists. And this is one of the things, brief rant, but I can't stand all these secret government organizations like FISA courts and the, what is that group, that NSA, and so on and so forth. They're really just an excuse for us to spend money we don't have and violate the liberties of American citizens. People say, well, yeah, but we need to be protected, right? It's like, dude, when has there ever been a time when America did not have enemies? And big enemies at that. I mean, at first, it was Great Britain. Then it was France in the Quasi-War. Then it was Great Britain again. Then it was Mexico. Then the Confederacy. Eventually it was Russia and Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Turks and Japan and Germany again. We fought with Korea. We didn't like China. We fought with Vietnam. Soviet Union, of course. Like, when has it ever been true that we did not have powerful enemies? And likewise, when has it ever been true that there wasn't terrorist groups who were trying to either attack the United States or start some kind of a riot from within the United States, right? Think of the Ku Klux Klan. I don't know if it's necessarily right to consider Native American groups terrorists, but you could add them there, right? Obviously, we all know about Al-Qaeda. Think about the Coal Wars that happened between the 1910s and the 1950s, and the different labor unions and the different cartels and the different organized crime units that were selling bootleg liquor. You know what I mean? Like, when has it ever been true that we didn't have some quasi-terrorist organization either trying to attack us from without or trying to start some nonsense from within? And when has it ever been true that we didn't have incredibly powerful enemies that were amongst the more powerful nations in the world, and which would love to see nothing more than us taken down? And if it is true that has always been a constant theme in American life, then why is it only as of the last 20 years that all of a sudden we need to surveil everybody? because it's just so much worse now, even though it's literally not. But terrorist activity in the United States is nowhere near as prevalent now as it was in the 1930s. I mean, that is just simply a fact, friends. Study the 1930s and the Cold Wars, and you will figure out that while we certainly have a lot more who have died, that mainly has to do with the fact that 9/11 was such a massive attack, right? 3,000 some odd people died in that attack. But as far as the prevalence of attacks, it was way worse in the past. Study the Ku Klux Klan. Study the Cold Wars. Study the early Black Power movements, right? The Wild West. You know what I mean? Nothing even close to what we have now. Or excuse me, other way around. Nothing even close to what we had then. Anyways, that's just a rant. My point being, I hate FISA, and I hate this whole thing in a time of aggressive and hostile terrorists and foreign powers. Like, dude, shut up. Okay. We all know what you're trying to do. You're trying to spend more money we don't have so that a government paycheck is being provided to some employees who don't deserve to be employed by the particular organization that employs them. And you're trying to curtail the liberties of the United States citizens. Sorry, but not sorry. Applications to surveil former Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page included two which the Justice Department has conceded were inaccurate because a key source disavowed comments included in them and were not issued under 702. But broad suspicion on the part of the Republicans about politicization of the FBI's intelligence work has put the renewal of that authority in doubt and prompted many GOP lawmakers to call for reforms that go well beyond the expiring provisions. And thank God, we definitely need reforms. The FBI is at this point the political, not the political wing, the paramilitary wing, the investigative wing, the law enforcement wing of the Democratic Party. That is not good. We do not want a politicized FBI. This is the first time we've had one. Look at J. Edgar Hoover from the past. And it probably won't be the last. You know, if the Lord wills and tarries and this country continues for another 300 years, we're probably going to go through this cycle a couple more times because thus is the nature of government bureaucracy. However, that doesn't mean we should just sit by and twiddle our thumbs while it is going on, right? We gave a whole litany of investigations surrounding, you know, why is it that Stormy Daniels and Trump are investigated, but Eric Swalwell and the Chinese spy are not, right? Why is it that the January 6th investigation is such a big deal, but investigations into the George Floyd riots that killed 30 people and did $2 billion worth of damage and lasted over 3 months, that's not, right? Why is it that one's an insurrection and Chaz, even though they literally declared an autonomous zone, which is fancy talk for nation, is not, right? Why is it that storming the Capitol then was a problem, but storming the Capitol recently in Tennessee a couple months ago is not? Why is it that Trump is under investigation for campaign fraud, but Hillary Clinton's, the investigation for Hillary Clinton's emails and all that kind of stuff? Nothing. Why are we investigating the Trump Foundation and not the Clinton Foundation? Because of politics. Does that mean that Trump shouldn't be investigated? That's not necessarily what I'm saying. Okay. If we want the law to apply equally to both, and we want to investigate both, then I guess I don't have as much of a problem. But the thing is, we don't, right? The thing is, we only investigate one side. It's only ever pro-life groups that are considered potential domestic terrorist threats. It's never pro-choice groups, pro-abort groups, pro-death groups, which literally firebomb crisis pregnancy centers that are considered potential domestic terrorist threats. It's only ever the League of the South and people who are, quote, neo-Confederate. It's never the Nation of Islam and people who want to establish a new Africa in the South, right? It's only ever the Texit movement. It's never the Calexit movement. It's only ever the people who want to say that climate change is either overblown or outright a hoax. It's never the literal eco-terrorists. And I can go on with that. Every time we say somebody's a domestic terrorist, every time we say somebody needs to be investigated, every time we say somebody's a potential threat, it's always on the right. It's never on the left. Are there people on the right with nefarious intentions? Of course. The right is made up of human beings just like the left is. But that's not the point I'm making right now. The point I'm making right now is that those investigations are only going to one side and they should be going to both. There is no clearer example of this than January 6th versus 2020. Anyways, I feel like that rant maybe didn't have a whole lot to do with well, yes, it did, of course, because they're talking about the FBI is the politicized investigative bureau, right? Anyways, the FBI's response to the Durham report said that the bureau shares those concerns and we share your concern that we might potentially be becoming a politicized organization. Oh, that's hilarious. The FBI's response to the Durham report said that the Bureau shares those concerns and stressed in a footnote that the FBI is under new management. Quote, all senior executives overseeing the Crossfire Hurricane investigation have left the FBI as a result of termination, resignation, or retirement, end quote, FBI General Counsel Jason Jones wrote, using the code name for the Trump-Russia probe. Isn't the point of a code name supposed to be that you don't know what it's referencing? I don't know. Anyways, maybe I just have a misunderstanding of code names. Who played ball with Durham and who didn't? Durham's mission has been politically fraught from the outset, with many Democrats and current former intelligence agency professionals deeply skeptical of his inquiry. I wonder why. Some publicly questioned his skill set to assess judgments made by intelligence officials about the intentions of Russian and other foreign governments. Now, why is that, do you think? Considering the rant I just went on about how these things tend to only go one way, why do you think that they have problems with his skill set, with his ability? The man is literally a high-ranking FBI official, right? So what could possibly be the problem here? Oh, that he was appointed by William Barr, right? Now, I do not like William Barr. I think William Barr is an absolute joke and a fraud. However, he's a Republican, and so that's all the Democrats need to know as far as whether or not anybody he appoints or anybody who's related to him or anybody who may have potentially dated his ex-wife. I don't know if he even has an ex-wife, but you see my point. It's like you got to do this 6 degrees of separation from the Republicans before you can actually trust anybody. It's completely ridiculous. That's literally the only thing they have against him. Anyways, moving on. One measure of the perceived credibility of Durham's probe is the roster of individuals who chose to cooperate with his investigation and those who gave him the cold shoulder. Durham's team interviewed former CIA Director John Brennan in August 2020, Clinton campaign foreign policy advisor and Biden national security advisor Jake Sullivan in November 2021, Clinton campaign chair John Podesta in January 2022, and Clinton herself in May of 2022, the report shows. Among those who turned Durham down, former FBI Director James Comey, former FBI Director Andrew McCabe, a senior FBI agent for national security matters, William Priestap, private investigator Glenn Simpson, internet executive Rodney Joffe, I don't know if I said that right, and Clinton campaign lawyer Mark Elias, though Elias did testify as a witness for Durham during the trial of Michael Sussman. Peter Strzok, I don't know how to say that, a senior FBI agent suing over his firing by the Bureau, agreed to discuss one aspect of the Trump-Russia probe, but declined a broader interview. The report describes a dramatic moment in one of Durham. Actually, I already read this part, and it's not really important. Anyways, you guys get the point here from this particular article. I want to read another one for you here in just a second. By the way, I see some more people have joined us in the live chat. So shalom to you guys, and thank you very much for being here. And yes, absolutely. Let me be clear here. This is I'm really glad that you guys are noticing that I had thrown that out, because that is literally the law. I know this isn't the point of what we're talking about right now, but I brought it up for a reason. It is literally legal to have sex with a 14-year-old girl if you are 24 years or younger in California. It's a fact. Look it up. That does not mean it's okay, of course. In fact, the reason I want you guys to know about it is because that needs to change. Like, for sure. Like, and not only does it need to change, but if you're living outside of the state of California, you need to be vigilant, friends. People say that the plus in LGBTQ plus doesn't stand for anything like pedophile. Really? You sure about that? Because with Drag Queen Story Hour in California making it legal to screw 14-year-olds, I think it might potentially be going there. I think we might be headed that direction, friends. Anyways, also, yeah, Antifa gets a pass, even though for some reason, any sort of right-wing group does not get a pass, right? Oh, well, Antifa's not even an organization, man. Yeah, okay, whatever. Neither is radical Islamic terrorism, but nevertheless, we still manage to find all the radical Islamic terrorist groups, the individual cells, and prosecute them, right? Anyways, by the way, Shalom Solo, Shalom Richard. I don't know if it's very professional of me to do a news show and acknowledge the live chat, but I'm doing it. So here we are. Shalom Jamie. No need to apologize. Yeah. Please do be noting that. I want to make that clear. Please do be noting what I brought up earlier. It is legal. I'm going to say this again. It is legal in California if you are 24 years or younger to sleep with a 14-year-old girl. If you're 25 or younger, a 15-year-old girl. 26 or younger, a 16-year-old girl. So on. Do the 10 years math. And you guys need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of that because if you live in California, you either need to try to help solve that problem or potentially leave. And you need to be aware of that because that is one of the agendas that the left is trying to push. Know that. Understand that. Okay? This they're pushing pedophilia thing is not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. That's not a law that was proposed. It is the law in California. Okay? I know it wasn't the point we brought up, but I am glad that people started to notice it because that's the reason I brought it up in the first place. And I'm glad it caught you guys' attention. That is the law in California. So be on the lookout for that. There is going to come a time, friends, because let's just be perfectly honest here. While it might be true that your state is a little bit more sane, it's a little bit more conservative, it's a little bit more old-fashioned, the progressives in your state think the same way as the progressives in the other states. The difference in the red states is that they don't have as much power. But that is the kind of thing that they're going to be proposing here soon. Mark my words. And be on the lookout for it. Be on guard for it. The plus, and this is not to say anything in particular about, because, you know, obviously I have my disagreements being a religious man with homosexuality. But to be fair, I know a good deal of homosexuals who are very much opposed to this development in their movement. So I'm not trying to lambaste every homosexual person in the same group here. But the movement, the LGBT plus movement, is going this direction. And they've been going this direction for quite some time. By the way, also on this note, we did get Roe v. Wade overturned. I know a lot of people want to get a Bergefeld overturned. To be honest with you, that's not even on my radar. Why? Look up Louisiana v. Kennedy. Look up Coker v. Georgia. It is currently unconstitutional. Hear me now. It is currently unconstitutional, according to 1977 Coker v. Georgia, to execute a rapist. Yes, you heard that correctly. It is unconstitutional to execute a rapist, according to a 1977 judgment by the Supreme Court called Coker v. Georgia. Look it up. Another development in 2008 called Kennedy v. Louisiana, building off of Coker v. Georgia, said it is unconstitutional. I guess it's the same thing, right? Said it is unconstitutional to execute a pedophile. Look that up. You cannot legally in this country execute somebody for having sex with a minor. It's a fact. Look it up. Kennedy v. Louisiana, and Coker v. Georgia. And after you've looked it up, make that your new priority. Okay? If you have a problem with a Bergefeld, fine. Worry about that way down the line. Because we got much bigger fish to fry, particularly rapists and pedophiles. And quite literally frying them. Anyways, that was a big rant. Yahoo says things that make the blood boil for 300 degrees, Alex, or for $300, Alex. No freaking kidding. You know what? I might do actually now that I'm on this rant. Not today, but next week. I do want to talk about this WEF Elon Musk thing. But I think I also might do a whole 30 minutes or more just talking about Coker v. Georgia, Kennedy v. Louisiana, laws passed in California, and this move that we've been going down for quite some time towards being culturally okay with child sex, because not enough people are talking about it, and the people who are talking about it are talking about it like it's a conspiracy theory, or talking about it like it's something that's going to happen later on, and it's something that's been going on for like 15 years at this point at least. Anyways, I have other stuff to talk about. Got myself ranting about something that wasn't even one of my topics. I'll take distractions that are certainly important for 300. Anywho. So another article here from the Durham report. We're probably not going to get to the other things I wanted to get to today, but that's fine. This one from Fox News. FBI responds to scathing Durham report on Trump-Russia probe, touts dozens of corrective actions. By the way, friends, considering that rant was probably not politically correct, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified every time we go live, and consider following us on Rumble just in case this content starts to be removed. I have a sneaking suspicion that I may have awoken the overlords and their censorious ways in my little rant there. Maybe not, but this is YouTube we're talking about. Anyways, the FBI has responded to the scathing Durham report on Trump-Russia probe, touts dozens of corrective actions. The DOJ released the more than 300-page report on Monday. By the way, you can find the full PDF of the report online if you wish to read it. 300 pages is it's not too much. It's about the size of you know what? Actually, I can check on that. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. 189, so I guess it's a little bit more than a standard children's book. Man, I don't have a whole lot of fiction here. Let's see, Hamlet. All right, this particular version of Hamlet, about 325 pages. So, it's like reading Hamlet or any other work of fiction that's about the same size. So it's not too big. It's pretty big for a political report, though. So, but anyways, if you want to read it, you can find it online. Maybe I'll provide a link in the description for you guys. The FBI responded to the scathing report by special counsel John Durham that found the Department of Justice and the FBI, quote, failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law, end quote, when it launched the Trump-Russia investigation. Now, that's a big part of this that the previous Political article did not discuss. The Durham article did conclude that the FBI failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law, and did conclude that the FBI was overstepping its bounds in the Trump-Russia investigation, which is why I started off by saying that this was a good deal of vindication for the Trump campaign. Now, again, I do want to be clear. I'm not a Trump supporter. All things considered, I mean, we've had such a terrible track record of presidents post Ronald Reagan that Trump really does look good by comparison. I'll freely admit that. If I were to say, you have Trump on one hand and you have the Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Biden collectively on the other hand, Trump is certainly a better president than any of them were. I think that that's true. I also don't think he was a good one. He doubled our national debt. He completely destroyed our position as moral conservatives because of the absolutely detestable way that he lives his life. He kind of opened the door and took the bait for Republicans to be lambasted and attacked and investigated by the Democratic Party. There's a lot of issues I have with him. At the same time, issues aside, it is true that he's a better president, in my opinion, than the last 5 we had. And it's equally true that the investigations surrounding him are entirely political in nature, right? I don't have to like somebody to recognize that they are entirely political in nature. They simply are. You know what I mean? At any rate, the FBI responded Monday to the scathing report by special counsel John Durham that found... Oh, wait, hang on. I already read that. In a statement to Fox News Digital, the agency touted what it said were dozens of corrective actions already implemented as a result of the Durham investigation. As a result of the Durham investigation. So this investigation is at least winning in some capacity, in at least in theory, in getting the FBI to, what's the word there? Rectify? I feel like I'm misusing that word. Doesn't matter. It's early, guys. I wasn't supposed to do this till noon, okay? Usually I work at 2 o'clock, but I have to work early today, so I had to do the show earlier. Anyways, quote, the conduct in 2016 and 2017 that Special Counsel Durham, why did I say Adam? Not even there, examined was the reason that current FBI leadership already implemented dozens of corrective actions, which have now been in place for some time. Had those reforms been in place in 2016, the missteps identified in the report could have been prevented, end quote, the FBI said. So the FBI is just freely admitting that it made, quote unquote, missteps in the Trump-Russia investigation, which, remember, found no collusion. Trump-Russia collusion was a conspiracy theory in the colloquial sense, meaning it was one of those tinfoil hat theories. Now, I wear a tinfoil hat as snugly as the next guy. But this was demonstrated to be a legitimate tinfoil hat status conspiracy theory. Anyways, quote, this report reinforces the importance of ensuring the FBI continues to do its work with the rigor and objectivity and professionalism the American people deserve and rightly expect, end quote, it added. That's John Durham right there, by the way. Fun fact. Looks like a good grandpa. Fox obtained Durham's report Monday afternoon after his years-long investigation into the origins of the FBI's original investigation, known as Crossfire Hurricane. That investigation looked into whether the Trump campaign coordinated with Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election. Durham gave his final report to the Justice Department, which released it Monday afternoon. The report spans more than 300 pages. Quote, based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, we conclude that the department and the FBI failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report, end quote, the report said. One more time, this is what the Durham report concluded. Based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane, that is the Trump-Russia investigation, and related intelligence activities, likely related to January 6th, likely related to the call with Ukraine, likely related to, the Stormy Daniels thing, etc. We conclude that the department and the FBI failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report, end quote. Which, again, we've already seen the FBI kind of tacitly admits. Durham said his investigation also revealed that, quote, senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor toward the information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons and entities. This information in part triggered and sustained Crossfire Hurricane and contributed to the subsequent need for Special Counsel Mueller's investigation, the report said. In particular, there was significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded directly or indirectly by Trump's political opponents, end quote. New quote, the department did not adequately examine or question these materials and the motivations for providing them, even when at about the same time, the director of the FBI and others learned of significant and potentially contrary intelligence, end quote, the report said, and there is the end of that article. So we can see here that the ultimate conclusion of the Durham report is, in fact, that the FBI probe into a potential collusion on the part of Trump and Russia revealed that it was nefarious, that it was not ethical, that it was not in keeping with the FBI's own stated goals and standards. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like anybody's actually going to be prosecuted over this. But nevertheless, it is at least theoretically prompting the FBI to make some changes in the way that they do business. We'll see exactly, whether or not that actually takes place. I don't really think it will, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I'm only 25, but I've still nevertheless lived long enough to know that the government says it's going to do stuff and then doesn't do it. I think pretty much everybody who's 4 years or older has lived long enough to know that. But I digress on that particular point. There is one more thing I wanted to briefly get to. We'll speak more about it on a next week episode because I'm running out of time here. I like to only go about an hour here. But I won't even put up my tab because we're not going to be able to talk about it entirely. But this is some foreshadowing for a future conversation. The head of the World Council of Churches has gone to Russia on a peace mission. WCC delegation goes to Moscow just days after a similar trip to Kiev. Visits aimed at reconciling the various Orthodox churches to be a force for peace in the Russia-Ukraine war. Again, we will speak more about this next week when I am not just about out of time, having talked about the Durham report for the entire conversation. But the long and short is, as has become somewhat standard, for those of you who watch this show, you know that this has been a consistent theme. The World Council of Churches and, of course, the Vatican are playing peacemaker in the world's various conflicts. Okay? Now, if you've been watching this program for some time, then you know that this is not new, per se. It's new in the sense that it's only been a really serious thing in geopolitical spheres in the last decade or so. It's not new in the sense that it's been going on for the last decade or so. So depending on what exactly your definition of new is. We have seen Pope Francis, try to play moderator in Israel-Palestine, in Armenia, Azerbaijan, in North and South Korea, in the Colombian Civil War, in the Syrian Civil War, and so on, right? Now the World Council of Churches is trying to do the same here in Ukraine and Russia, right? And without getting too much into the details, because again, we'll be speaking more about this next week, what we're seeing is these international religious bodies like the Vatican and like the World Council of Churches are becoming more and more politically powerful and politically relevant as time is going on, primarily through the ecumenical movement, which both the leaders of the World Council of Churches and the current Pope Francis have made their number one priority, right? In uniting with each other, they have taken it upon themselves to speak essentially for all of the world's Christians, and being that that is the largest religion in the world, if you count Protestants, Orthodox, and Catholics as all members of the same faith, I do not. That means you have quite a loud voice coming from nations all across the globe, right? I think this is another step in full recognition of the Vatican City in the United Nations and the establishment of a United Religions, which is, I think, going to be like the second lung breathing together with the United Nations, as I have spoken about here for quite some time. But nevertheless, we don't have time to talk about that in full. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of detail there. Excuse me, look at this. We'll be talking more about that next week. I don't know if we'll be talking more about that because now I have a lot of things I want to talk about next week. I want to talk about this WEF Elon Musk thing. I want to talk about, obviously, the World Council of Churches. I want to talk about Coker v. Georgia and Louisiana v. Kennedy. And I also want to talk about any potential news that comes up next week. So I can't see the future, so I don't know what that's going to be. So we'll see when and where I get to it. Obviously, I do have two different shows, Tuesday and Thursday. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get out of here, friends. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like and share this video and consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. And leave any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature in the comment section down below. If you want to follow us on various social media platforms, you can do so. I am on Gab Parler, Facebook, Minds, Twitter, and Truth Social at the tag The Synagogue. Please do consider subscribing and also sharing this video to any of those websites. Also, we'd like to advise you guys to follow us on Rumble, just in case anything is taken down here, where you can get this. It's always posted after the fact because we don't go live to Rumble. You got to pay some money for that. But nevertheless, it does at least afford you the opportunity to watch our censored episodes, as well as always have a backup just in case we end up getting taken down. Also, remember, you can subscribe to either the Patreon or give a one-time donation to the PayPal if you wish to contribute to the work we're doing here. If you do subscribe to the Patreon, $10 monthly, you can give as much or as little as you like. But if you subscribe $10 monthly, you will get full access to my Blogletite bi-weekly political column. We will be posting our next blog this Friday, and every other Friday we post this blog. You get full access, like I said, for $10 monthly. And you may even get access to some other stuff because it's possible, considering the fact that I want to do so much stuff here as far as, World Council and all that kind of stuff, that some exclusive content will be Patreon only. So definitely do consider giving there. It's only, like I said, only $10 monthly, and I appreciate anybody who does. We're going to go ahead and get out of here, friends. So I want to say this has been the Synagogue News. Think like a Neanderthal. We are here at the Watchdog. And I want to ask you guys the question, in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise?